Will woke up cold. His body felt stiff, like he had slept for too long. The lid of the sleep pod slid open with a hiss. Bright lights hurt his eyes. "Exit pod and proceed to preparation area," a mechanical voice said. Will climbed out. His legs wobbled under him. Around him, other humans emerged from their pods, all looking confused and unsteady. A large room opened before them. The walls were metal, like everything else on the ship. Rows of gray uniforms hung on racks. Tables held small devices and packets. "All humans will dress and equip," a Vrexian officer ordered from a raised platform. "You have 15 minutes. Will found a uniform in his size and changed quickly. The material felt strange against his skin, not cloth, but something smoother and lighter. He picked up the devices from the table. One looked like a watch. Another was a small earpiece. A human woman about his age dressed next to him. "Her name?" "Tag Reed Miller, Susan. Do you know what these are for?" Will asked, holding up the devices. Susan shook her head. "I was a tech student before they took me. These look advanced, but I don't recognize them." "I'm Will," he said, "from Nebraska." "Susan, California." She managed a small smile. "Good to meet another human who talks. Some people are too scared." After dressing, guards led them to a large hall filled with rows of tables. The food looked like colored paste in small bowls. It had almost no taste when Will tried it. "Nutritionally complete," a guard explained when someone complained. "Your preferences are irrelevant." The massive ship, called the CGS Indomitable, became their new home. CGS stood for Concordat Galactic Ship. Will learn they were just one small part of an enormous fleet that controlled much of the galaxy. Training began immediately. Will's group learned to maintain the ship's systems, fix machinery, and follow hundreds of rules. The punishments for mistakes were harsh. Will saw humans sent to isolation chambers for minor errors. Others received painful shocks from the devices on their wrists. 6 months passed. Will worked in maintenance, fixing systems throughout the ship. He learned the Indomitable carried over 10,000 beings from 30 different species. Humans were one of the newest additions to the Concordat and considered one of the least important. "Your species has primitive technology and no special physical abilities," Lieutenant Drex told them during training. The lieutenant was a reptilian alien with scales, like the one who had taken Will from his farm. "Your only value is your problem-solving and adaptability. Remember this and know your place." Each day blurred into the next. Wake up, work, eat the tasteless food. Sleep in the cramped crew quarters with 15 other humans. Repeat. Will became good at fixing things. He learned the ship's systems quickly. The aliens noticed this and gave him more complicated jobs. This let him move around the ship more freely than most humans. One day, Lieutenant Drex called Will to Maintenance Section 7. "The atmospheric processors are malfunctioning again," Drex said. "Fix them." "Yes, sir," Will replied automatically. The maintenance tunnels ran like veins through the ship. Will crawled through them with his tool case, finding the broken processor. He worked quietly, focusing on the task. Then he heard voices and crying. Will moved toward the sound, passing through a narrow tunnel that opened into a wider section. Through a grate, he saw into an adjacent corridor. 3 Concordat officers stood there, 2 Vrexians and an alien that looked like a walking octopus, which Will had learned was called a cephalid. Between them stood Susan Miller, the woman Will had met on his first day. Her face was streaked with tears. "The human female is defective," one Vrexian said coldly. "She questions orders and suggests improvements to established protocols. Recommend neural reconditioning." Will froze. He had heard whispers about neural reconditioning. Humans who underwent it came back changed. They never questioned anything. They barely talked. Their eyes looked empty. "This is the 3rd human, the cycle exhibiting the same defect," the cephalid officer noted, its tentacles moving slowly. "Perhaps we should implement ship-wide reconditioning for all human personnel." Will should have left. He should have pretended. He heard nothing, but Susan had been kind to him. She was one of the few people who still smiled sometimes. Before he knew what he was doing, Will backed up, then approached the corridor from a different angle, making noise so they would hear him coming. Sirs, he said, stepping into view with his tool case. I've been sent to check atmospheric conditions in this sector. Readings indicate dangerous levels of carbon monoxide. All personnel should evacuate immediately. The officers looked at him suspiciously. Carbon monoxide is only dangerous to certain species, the senior Vrexian said. Will nodded seriously. Yes, sir. Including cephalids. The levels I'm reading would cause severe neurological damage within minutes. The cephalid's tentacles curled in alarm. After a moment of hesitation, the Vrexian released Susan. Report to medical after completing your task, human, he ordered. Before they departed, taking the cephalid with them. As soon as they were gone, Susan collapsed against the wall. They were going to erase me, she whispered. Not kill me, erase me. Will helped her stand. We need to talk, he said quietly, and not here. That night, Will couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to what he had seen. The way the officers talked about humans like they were tools to be fixed when they didn't work right. Like their thoughts and ideas were defects to be removed. He waited until the ship's night cycle was fully underway. Then he slipped out of his bunk and went to the maintenance bay where sensors had blind spots. Susan was already waiting. I brought others, she said. 4 more humans stood in the shadows. We'll recognize them all. Greg Patterson worked in engineering. Linda Howard worked in communications. Frank Turner was a security officer, one of the few humans trusted with that job. Diane Martinez was a medical technician. What they're doing is wrong, Will said simply, and I think it's time we did something about it. 5 faces looked back at him with a mixture of fear and determination. What exactly are you suggesting, Hayes? Frank asked, his security training making him naturally suspicious. Will took a deep breath. I'm suggesting we remember who we are. Humans don't just obey, we innovate, we adapt, we overcome. The Concordat sees these as flaws to be corrected. I see them as our greatest strengths. We can't fight them, Greg sighed, his voice low. There are too many. They're too powerful. I'm not talking about fighting, not yet, Will said. I'm talking about connecting, finding other humans who think like us, learning the ship's weaknesses, preparing. For what? Linda asked. Will looked at each of them. For the day when we stop being their tools and start being humans again. By the end of that secret meeting, the first 6 members of what would later be called the Human Liberation Force had made a pact they would appear to obey. They would do their jobs well, but they would begin to prepare, to plan, to connect with other humans throughout the fleet. Will Hayes had been ordered to obey. Instead, he had taken the first steps toward building an army. Time passed differently in space. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Will and his small group worked carefully in the shadows of the massive ship. Greg Patterson discovered something important about the ship's communication systems. They have back doors, he explained during one of their secret meetings. Small gaps in security. I can send messages to other Concordat ships without the officers knowing. Linda Howard created a special way of talking. Normal words with hidden meanings, she said. We can speak openly, but only other humans will understand the real message. Frank Turner used his position in security to start training. During exercise periods allowed by the Concordat, he taught small groups of trusted humans how to fight. Just basic self-defense, he told the officers when they asked, but he was teaching much more. Diane Martinez created a warning system. I can see the medical records, she whispered. I know which humans they plan to recondition next. We can. Warn them before it happens. Will coordinated everything. His job in maintenance gave him access to the whole ship. He moved between sections, carrying messages and finding new humans to join them. Susan became his closest friend and partner. We need a name, she said one night as they sat in the rarely used observation deck, looking at the stars. Something that means something to us. Will thought about this. The officers call difficult humans disobedient, like it's the worst thing we could be. Susan smiled. Then that's who we are, the disobedient. By the 1-year mark of Will's time on the ship, their network included over 200 humans, across 12 Concordat vessels. Some were just informants, passing along useful information. Others were active members, training and preparing. All of them shared the same goal: freedom. "The Concordat thinks humans are weak because we feel emotions," Will told a group of new members. "But our emotions give us strength they don't understand." They met in small groups in places with little surveillance. The ship's arboretum became a favorite spot. The plants interfered with monitoring devices, and the aliens rarely went there. The soil and plants reminded the humans of Earth. "We appear to obey while planning to resist," Will explained. "We use their expectations against them. They think we're clever but not cunning, resourceful but not rebellious." The aliens never suspected. To them, humans were still just useful. Tools. They saw Will as an efficient worker, nothing more. His psychological profile said he was obedient and stable. The profile was wrong. One night, Will received an urgent message from a human engineer named Alan Carter. Alan worked on the CGS Subjugator, the Concordat's main research ship. "They're developing a new technology," Alan's message said. "Not just reconditioning any more complete cognitive restructuring. They plan to test it on humans aboard the Subjugator in 3 weeks. After that, they'll use it on all humans in the fleet." "Hayes, if this happens, there won't be anything left of us to save," Will called an emergency meeting with his core team. They gathered in the maintenance bay, faces tense. "We're out of time," Will said after sharing Alan's message. "We need to act now." "Act how?" Greg asked. "We've been gathering information and training, but we never decided what to do with it all." Will took a deep breath. "We take control of the ships." Silence fell over the group. "That's impossible," Frank said finally. "Even with our training, we're outnumbered and outgunned." "Not if we do it all at once," Will said. "Not if we use surprise and coordination. The Concordat doesn't think we're capable of organizing across multiple ships. They don't believe we would ever resist." Linda frowned. "Even if we could take the ships, what then?" "The rest of the Concordat fleet would hunt us down." "One step at a time," Will said. "First, we take the ships. Then we use that leverage to negotiate." Diane looked skeptical. "Negotiate for what?" "For our freedom," Will said simply. "For the right to be treated as equals, not tools. For Earth's independence." They talked long into the night, planning and arguing. By morning, they had a plan. They would coordinate the uprising across all 12 ships where they had influence. They would take control of key systems, engines, weapons, life support. They would isolate the officers and take command. "We need a signal," Susan said. "Something all humans will understand." Will thought of his home, of the wheat fields stretching to the horizon, of his parents standing on the porch as he was taken away. "Remember the Earth," he said. "That's our signal." Over the next 2 weeks, final preparations were made. Messages passed between ships. Weapons were improvised from tools and machinery. Every human in their network memorized their role in the plan. Greg created a special program to disrupt ship systems at the right moment. Linda prepared a broadcast message that would reach all humans simultaneously. Frank trained his most trusted fighters for the key targets they needed to secure. Diane prepared medical supplies for the wounded they knew they would have. Will walked the ship as always, fixing systems and following orders, but inside a fire burned. He thought of his grandfather's stories of human courage. He thought of Susan and the empty eyes of the reconditioned humans. He thought of Earth, so far away but always present in his heart. The night before the planned uprising, Will couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk, staring at the metal ceiling. "Are you afraid?" Susan whispered from the next bunk. "Yes," Will admitted, "but not of failing or dying." "What then?" "I'm afraid of what happens if we win," he said. "How do we build something better than what we're fighting against?" Susan was quiet for a moment. "We remember we're human. That's enough to start with." Will nodded in the darkness. Tomorrow would change everything. They would no longer be tools or slaves. They would be humans making their own choices, facing their own consequences. In the morning, Will sent a message that would echo across 12 ships and thousands of human minds. 3 simple words that would start a revolution. Remember the Earth. The day of action began like any other on the CGS Indomitable. Will reported to his maintenance shift. Susan went to navigation. The other members of their team went to their normal posts. They looked calm on the outside, but inside each of them felt their hearts racing. At exactly 1500 hours ship time, Greg Patterson started his program. Power flickered throughout the ship. Lights dimmed, then brightened again. Non-essential systems shut down, then restarted. As expected, this triggered emergency protocols. Alarms sounded. A voice announced over the speakers, "All officers report to emergency stations." The Concordat officers moved quickly, following their training. What they didn't know was that Will's team had prepared for this moment for months. The emergency stations had been carefully sabotaged. Door locks failed. Communication devices stopped working. Air quality changed in certain sections, making it hard for non-humans to breathe but leaving humans unaffected. Throughout the ship, humans received the activation signal through hidden channels Linda had created. Remember the Earth. In the security section, Frank Turner moved first. He and 20 trained humans secured the weapons storage. They had practiced this move many times in secret. The few guards were surprised and quickly overcome. "No killing," Frank ordered his team. "Stun weapons only." In the medical bay, Diane Martinez and her group took control. They had stored sedatives and knockout gas for weeks. The alien medical staff found themselves suddenly unconscious. Greg shut down the main computer systems, then restarted them with new programming he had secretly installed. Now only humans with special codes could access key functions. Will, Susan, and Linda headed for the bridge. They encountered resistance along the way. A group of Rexian guards blocked their path, weapons ready. "Stop and surrender," the lead guard ordered. "Human rebellion is futile." Will stepped forward. In his hand was a device Frank had given him, a modified tool that now worked as a stun weapon. "We don't want to hurt anyone, but we will not be erased." The guards attacked. Will and his team were ready. The fighting was brief but intense. Will felt a sharp pain as a guard's weapon grazed his arm, but the stun weapons worked as planned. Soon the guards lay unconscious, and the path to the bridge was clear. The bridge doors were sealed. Greg's voice came through Will's communication device. "I can override the locks, but only for 10 seconds. "Do it," Will ordered. The doors slid open. Inside, the ship's senior officers turned in surprise. The captain, a tall Vrexian with gold markings on his shell, stood from his command chair. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Susan fired her stun weapon. The captain collapsed. The other officers reached for weapons, but Will's team was faster. In moments, the bridge crew was unconscious. "Secure them," Will ordered. "Then take control of the systems." As his team worked, Will activated the ship-wide communication system. Similar events were happening on 11 other ships across the Concordat fleet. Not all were successful. On 3 ships, the human uprising was quickly stopped. But on 9 vessels, including the research ship Subjugator, humans had taken control. "This is William Hayes speaking to all personnel, human and non-human alike," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "We have taken control of this vessel. We do not wish to harm anyone. We do not wish to destroy the Concordat. We simply refuse to be erased." Throughout the ship, humans and aliens listened, some in fear, some in confusion, some in hope. "Humanity did not ask to join your wars," Will continued. "We did not volunteer to be conscripts. We were ordered to obey, and for too long we did. But we can no longer follow orders that lead to our destruction. We are not your tools. We are not your weapons. We are human beings, and from this moment forward we will determine our own fate." On the bridge, Linda established communication with the other ships under human control. Reports came in. The Subjugator was secure. The weapon being developed. It was now under human control. 3 other major vessels had been taken with minimal casualties. On several smaller ships, the situation was still unclear. "What's happening on the CGS Defender?" Will asked. It was one of their key targets. Fighting continues, came the response. Humans control engineering, but not the bridge. Will turned to Susan. Can we help them? She shook her head. We're too far away. They'll have to succeed or fail on their own. The next hours were tense. Will's team secured the Indomitable section by section. Most alien crew members surrendered when they saw the humans had control of life support and weapon systems. Some tried to fight back and were stunned and confined to quarters. No permanent harm, Will repeated to every human team. We're not here for revenge. By ship's evening, the situation had stabilized. Of the 12 ships targeted in the uprising, 9 were now under human control. Thousands of Concordat personnel were confined but unharmed. The humans had suffered losses too, 17 dead, dozens wounded. Each death weighed on Will's conscience, but he knew the price of inaction would have been much higher. In the captain's office adjacent to the bridge, Will met with his core team. Their faces showed exhaustion and tension, but also determination. What now? Greg asked. We have the ships, but the rest of the Concordat fleet will come for us soon. Now we negotiate? Will said, we use what we have to gain what we need. And what's that? Frank asked. Recognition, Will said. Not as tools or slaves, but as equals. An end to conscription, an end to reconditioning. Freedom for Earth and all human colonies. They'll never agree, Diane said. The Concordat has existed for thousands of years. They don't change their ways. Then maybe it's time they learned how, Will said. As if in answer to his words, the ship's long-range sensors activated. Susan moved to the console. Multiple ships approaching, she reported, her voice tense. A full battle group led by the dreadnought CGS Inevitable. They'll be in weapons range in 3 hours. Will looked at the faces of his friends, his army. They had come so far, risked so much. Now they faced their greatest test. Send a message to all our ships, he ordered. Prepare for possible attack, but hold positions. And send another message to the approaching battle group. What message? Linda asked. Will thought of his home, of Earth, of all that humans had. Built and lost and might yet create. Tell them we're ready to talk. The enormous dreadnought CGS Inevitable appeared on the view screen. It was 5 times larger than the Indomitable. Behind it came 20 more Concordat warships, their weapons ready. They could destroy us in seconds, Susan whispered. Will nodded. But they won't. We have something they want. A message came through on all channels. The face that appeared on the screen was not Vrexian or any species Will recognized. This alien had dark purple skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. This is Supreme Commander Jalvex of the Concordat High Command, the alien said. Its voice was deep and smooth. Your rebellion is over. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Will stepped forward. He wore the same maintenance uniform he had worn for a year, but now he stood straight and proud. Supreme Commander, this is William Hayes. Before you open fire, consider 3 things. First, your vessels contain thousands of your own personnel, whom we have treated humanely. Second, the research vessel Subjugator contains technology too valuable for you to destroy. Will paused. The next part was a risk. Alan Carter had told him about the research on the Subjugator, but Will wasn't sure if what he was about to say was possible. Still, it was their best chance. And third, we've reconfigured the Subjugator's prototype gravitic resonance device to transmit its effects to every jump gate in this sector. Jump gates were how ships moved quickly between star systems. Without them, travel took years instead of days. Silence followed. Will held his breath. The entire bridge crew waited. Finally, Jalvex spoke again. What are your demands, human? Will looked at Susan. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. We want recognition, Will said. Not as a protectorate species, but as full members of the Concordat with equal rights. We want an immediate end to forced conscription and neural reconditioning. And we want guarantees of autonomy for Earth and all human settlements. Impossible, Jalvex replied immediately. The Concordat's structure has remained unchanged for 2,000 cycles. Then perhaps it's time for change, Will countered. The alternative is that we destroy the jump gate network and strand your fleet in this sector for years. During which time, who knows what might happen on Earth and your other protectorate worlds once they learn what's possible. Another long silence followed. Will could almost feel the tension across space. The High Council will require time to consider these unprecedented demands, Shavek finally said. A temporary ceasefire is granted while negotiations proceed. The communication ended. Will let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Did we just win? Greg asked in disbelief. Not yet, Will said. But we got them to listen. That's a start. The next 3 days were tense. The human-controlled ships held their positions, surrounded by the much larger Concordat fleet. Messages passed back and forth between Will and the High Command. Each time the Concordat offered less than what the humans demanded. Each time Will refused to back down. They're testing our resolve, he told his team. They need to understand we're serious. On the 4th day, Will received a surprising message. The High Council requested a face-to-face meeting. They would send representatives to the Indomitable. Will would represent the humans. It's a trap, Frank warned. They'll try to capture you. Maybe, Will agreed. But it's also our best chance for real negotiation. The meeting was set for the Indomitable's conference room. Will chose Susan, Greg, and Linda to join him. Frank and his security team would stand guard. The Concordat representatives arrived in a small shuttle. There were 5 of them, each from a different species. Will recognized the Vrexian and Cephalid representatives. The others were new to him, including a representative of Shavek's purple-skinned species. I am Counselor Trelvos, the purple. Alien said, I speak for the High Council. The meeting began tensely. The Concordat representatives seemed unused to treating humans as equals. They spoke slowly, as if explaining to children. The Concordat has existed for 12,000 years. Trelvos said, We have brought order to a chaotic galaxy. Your species has been part of this order for mere decades. Yet you demand changes to our fundamental structure. We demand to be treated as thinking beings, not tools, Will replied. Is that really so unreasonable? Your species was assessed upon first contact, the Vrexian counselor said. You were found to be technologically primitive, but biologically and cognitively useful. Your proper place was assigned accordingly. And who decided what our proper place was? Susan asked. Did anyone ask us? The strong do not ask permission from the weak, the Cephalid counselor stated. This is the natural order, Will leaned forward. Then perhaps you should reconsider whether humans are weak. 9 of your ships are now under our control. Your most advanced research is in our hands. And we did this without your advanced weapons, or your thousands of years of experience. Imagine what we could do as allies instead of tools. The meeting continued for hours. Sometimes the discussion grew heated. Sometimes it seemed progress was being made. Will remained firm on the core demands, equal recognition and end to conscription, and autonomy for Earth. By evening, they had reached a tentative agreement. The Concordat would recognize humans as a provisional full-member species. Conscription would end, replaced by voluntary service. Earth and human colonies would receive limited autonomy. This is merely a framework, Trelvos cautioned. The full agreement will take months to finalize. We understand, Will said. But as a show of good faith, all neural reconditioning of humans stops immediately. And all currently conscripted humans are given the choice to return home. After some discussion among themselves, the counselors agreed. When they left, Will's team celebrated cautiously. Do you think they'll keep their word? Greg asked. They will if we remain strong, Will said. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Later that night, Will stood alone in the observation deck, looking at the stars. Susan found him there. What are you thinking about? She asked. Home, Will said. Nebraska. The wheat fields. My parents. Do you think we'll ever go back? Will considered this. Some of us will. But I think our home might be out here now, among the stars. Susan stood beside him, their shoulders touching. When they took you from that farm, did you ever imagine this would happen? Will shook his head. I was just trying to survive, then trying to help others survive. You built an army out of people who were chosen because they were expected to obey without question, Susan said with admiration. You saw strength where the Concordat saw only tools. I didn't build anything, Will said. I just reminded people of what was already inside them. As they stood watching the stars, Will thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had been a simple cadet ordered to obey, expected to surrender his humanity piece by piece. Instead, he had found within himself the courage to question, to resist, and to lead. The battle wasn't over. The Concordat might try to go back on their word. Other challenges would arise. But for the first time since humans had been forced into the galactic community, they had a voice and a choice in their own future. William Hayes, once a farm boy from Nebraska, now stood as the leader of a movement that might reshape human existence among the stars. And he had done it all because, when ordered to obey, he had chosen instead to lead. Lieutenant Olivia Summers never wanted to be anything but a medic. Growing up in a small town in Montana, she had always been the one to help others. When her friends fell off their bikes, she was there with bandages. When her younger brother broke his arm climbing a tree, she kept him calm until help arrived. She had a gift for staying steady when everyone else panicked. Now, at 32 years old, Olivia worked in the medical bay of the U.S. Resolute, a massive warship carrying over 2,000 people. The ship belonged to the United Earth Defense Force, humanity's shield against alien threats. Olivia wore her light blue medical uniform with pride, even if combat officers in their dark gray uniforms rarely noticed her. Another day, another patrol, she said to herself as she organized supplies in the main medical bay. The room was clean and bright, with 20 beds and advanced equipment. 5 other medical staff worked under her command, but none were on duty yet this early in the ship's morning cycle. The Resolute had been patrolling the edge of human space for 3 months. The war with the Careth had been going on for 3 years now. These aliens looked like tall, thin humans, but with skin like stone and eyes that glowed orange. They believed humans were spreading too fast across the galaxy. They attacked human colonies without warning, killing thousands. Olivia checked her tablet. No new patients overnight. That was good. She had enough time to finish her reports before her staff arrived. The ship's intercom crackled. All senior officers report to the command deck for briefing at 0800 hours. Olivia wasn't invited to those meetings. Medical officers were rarely included in battle planning, even though they dealt with the results. Captain Frank Morrison, who led the 47th Infantry Battalion on the Resolute, had spoken to Olivia maybe 5 times in 2 years. He was a tall man with a deep voice who seemed to look through medical staff as if they were invisible. Lieutenant Summers? Olivia looked up to see a young Marine standing in the doorway. His name tag read Pearson. His arm was wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Come in, Private, she said, patting an examination table. What happened? Training accident in the gym, he said, sitting down. Was sparring with Sergeant Cole and caught an elbow. Olivia unwrapped the bandage to find a deep cut that needed stitches. This will take a few minutes to fix, she said, reaching for her supplies. As she cleaned the wound, the ship's alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. Battle stations. This is not a drill. All personnel to battle stations. Private Pearson jumped up, but Olivia pushed him back down. I need to finish this first. You're no good to anyone bleeding. Her hands worked quickly, applying skin sealant and a protective cover. The whole time, her voice remained calm despite the chaos growing around them. Other medical staff rushed in, preparing the bay for possible casualties. There, she said, finishing the bandage. Now you can go. The private nodded gratefully and ran out. Olivia turned to her team. Prep all stations. Check blood supplies. Power up all surgical units. Her second-in-command, Nurse Alan Wyatt, looked worried. What's happening, Lieutenant? Before she could answer, the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered. Olivia grabbed a table to stay upright. We're under attack, she said. The Careth must have found us. The ship rocked again, harder this time. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the halls, followed by the hiss of emergency force fields activating. That meant hull breaches. Bad ones. The intercom crackled again, but instead of the captain's confident voice, a young woman spoke, her words rushing together in panic. "This is Ensign Jacobs on the bridge. We've taken heavy damage. Medical teams to all decks. We have multiple casualties." Olivia felt a chill. Where was the captain? Or any senior officer? She tapped her communication badge. "This is Lieutenant Summers in medical." "What's the situation, Ensign?" "The command deck took a direct hit," Jacobs replied, her voice shaking. "The captain." All the senior officers were in the briefing room. They're gone." The medical. They fell silent. Everyone stared at Olivia. She took a deep breath. "Understood. We'll send teams immediately." She turned to her staff. "Alan, take Martinez and Yang to Deck 3. Kim, you and Rivera head to Deck 5. I'll check the bridge." As her teams grabbed emergency kits and ran out, Olivia opened a secure cabinet and took out a sidearm. Medical officers carried weapons only in extreme situations. This qualified. The corridors were filled with smoke and wounded crew members. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. Olivia stopped to help when she could, applying quick treatments and directing the wounded toward the medical bay. When she reached the bridge, the doors were jammed. 2 engineers were trying to force them open. "Stand back," one of them called to her. "We almost—" With a groan, the doors slid open a few feet, enough to slip through. Inside, Olivia saw destruction. Part of the ceiling had collapsed. Electrical fires burned at 2 stations. Bodies lay on the floor. And at the captain's chair sat a very young woman with wide, frightened eyes. "Ensign Jacobs?" Olivia asked, moving quickly to check a fallen officer's pulse. "Dead." "Yes," the ensign said. Her hands shook on the controls. "Lieutenant, I don't know what to do. The Careth hit us with something new. Went right through our shields." Olivia checked 3 more officers. All dead. The bridge crew consisted now of Ensign Jacobs, a wounded communications officer trying to stay conscious at his post, and an equally injured weapons officer. "Where are the Careth ships now?" Olivia asked, applying a pressure bandage to the communications officer's leg. 2 destroyers circling back for another attack, Jacob said, pointing to the main screen. 2 red dots moved against the black of space, turning toward the Resolute's position. "Our engines are damaged. We can't run." Olivia finished treating the wounded officers and stood up straight. She looked around the bridge. No one else was coming. No senior officers would walk through that door to take charge. The chain of command was clear in these situations. The highest-ranking officer still alive took command. With the captain and all senior officers dead, command would fall to. Olivia swallowed hard as she realized the truth. Her, a medical officer who had never wanted to lead anything but a team of doctors, was now in command of a warship in the middle of a battle. "Ensign, open a ship-wide channel," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jacobs pressed some buttons. "Channel open, Lieutenant." Olivia took a deep breath and spoke the words she never thought she would say. "Attention all crew of the Use Resolute. This is Lieutenant Olivia Summers of Medical. Captain Morrison and the command staff have been killed in action. As the highest-ranking officer still alive, I'm taking command according to Regulation 15B. She paused, looking at the approaching enemy ships on the screen. "We are damaged but not defeated. Stand by for further orders. Summers out." She turned to the frightened bridge crew, who now looked to her for their survival. "Weapons, what do we have left?" she asked. The battle had just begun, and Olivia Summers, who had spent her life learning how to heal, would now have to learn how to fight.